Classroom movies.
When this rolled into the classroom, like you knew it was going to be a good day.
They're not just movies set inside a classroom, but the movies your substitute teachers likely made you watch when they didn't want to teach from the syllabus.
We're gonna have recess all the time.
And Dead Poets Society was certainly at the top of every substitute teacher's list, because they could just let Robin Williams do all the inspiring.
Oh, good God, boy, yeah, like that! There it is.
That they themselves were not inspired to do. Many students grew up to become critics who reviewed Dead Poets Society. Now, it's time for us to roast the critics.
It's fall now. What better fall movie is there than Rudy? Or Homeward Bound, or Fall Guy, Get It, or Fall, or even October Sky? But this season, we're going to talk about the 80s classic Dead Poets Society. Yes, the movie that was the butt of the most offensive joke on Friends.
Did you ever see Dead Poets Society? I thought that movie was so incredibly boring.
Head on over to Rotten Tomatoes and you'll find that the audience gave this perfect film a respectable 92%. But several critics were off their rockers and they collectively brought the score down to 85. Let's dive in like a good book and see why. The critics reviewed Dead Poets Society. Now it's time for us to roast the critics. First up is the legendary Roger Ebert from back in the good old days. He says not the worst of the countless recent movies about good kids and hidebound authoritarian older people. It may, however, be the most shameless in its attempt to pander to an adolescent audience. Far be it from me to criticize a dead man, but that wouldn't have stopped Gene Siskel. Actually, no. Better yet, let's hear Gene's response from himself.
I liked it more than you did. I had a problem with this formula ending, and I was with the picture up until that point.
Okay, Gene, that's all. He did end up recommending Dead Poets Society.
Well, I liked the picture, and I'd recommend
You would recommend it.
Yes.
I won't recommend it.
But with more hang-ups than were necessary. Their issues with the film were that there had already been a lot of movies like this before it, and Dead Poets Society apparently played into the established tropes. But really now, who in the 80s actually saw Stand and Deliver or Lean on Me? How about we look at it differently from this vantage point? What if we say Dead Poets Society inspired subsequent movies like Dangerous Minds and Mr. Holland's Opus, an inspirational teacher drama that Siskel and Ebert both thoroughly enjoyed, and who can blame them? David Keyes from cinemaphile.org says, "We cry not because of the sad situations, but because of its ludicrous attempts at being sad." Ah, but he did cry. He cried and he can't take it back. You see, Dead Poets Society even gets to the Camerons of the world.
Let Keating fry.
Determined to stand firm against Robin Williams and his entourage of adolescents. Vincent Canby from New York Times says, the movie undercuts Mr. Williams's exceptionally fine performance, making the character seem more of a dubious fool than is probably intended. Well, Mr. Canby, if you were perceptive enough to see Mr. Keating through the boy's eyes, you would recognize that Robin Williams must act like a dubious fool in order to snap the boys' attention from their studious and predictable worlds.
Now, many of you have seen Shakespeare done very much like this. "O Titus, bring your friend hither."
Otherwise, who's to say that he would have been able to get through to them? It may even be argued that he's offering to them a childhood they likely never had. And so it's probably why Mr. Vincent Canby gave this beloved film a rotten score, so that he can stand out from everyone else who professed love for it. So as far as Mr. Canby and Mr. Keating are concerned, they might be more alike than Mr. Canby cares to admit.
We're not so different, you and I.
Luke Y. Thompson from New Times says that Dead Poets Society is fairly tedious and predictable without being especially believable. This poor chap clearly never had a teacher that cared about him. In fact, Luke probably did attend a private boarding school for boys, and no authority figure showed him any glimmer of light or hope beyond his grey, sexless adolescent years. And Luke also wanted to be an actor like Neil in the movie, but his father kept telling him, "No, you will review other actors and critique their plays and movies. I will not have a son who wears makeup and dresses up in whatever frilly costume the Hollywood groomers force you to wear that week, twinkling and cavorting around like a precious sunflower following the sun's splendid rays in hills of poppylocks and dandelions.
Prancing around in your underwear with your wiener hanging out for everyone to see.
No, my son will be a writer whose pen builds careers and crumbles empires, No, Rupert, no, you will not be an actor. And if you can't hack it as a critic, then you will rise above the fray and review the critics who review movies. You will be a critic of critics, and if not, you will end up in the factory like me and contract lung disease by years of PB inhalation. Damn it, Rupert, roast the critics and roast them hard. Make it so that they never want to utter a disagreeable word around you ever again.
Damn!
Oh, I'm sorry. I got a little carried away there. Let's move on, shall we? John J. Puccio from Movie Metropolis says, Dead Poets Society adds little to the genre that hasn't been said before, and aims instead at familiar stereotypes and overly obvious tugs at the heartstrings. Oh dear, poor John. He would rather someone reinvent the wheel of classroom dramas. Well then, I propose to John a different type of classroom drama. How about for the entire 90-minute run of the movie, the teacher just teaches? He'll start off with a roll call of all the actors present to assume the roles of students, and then we learn trigonometry for the duration of the film. How's that for not being a familiar stereotype? The question, John, isn't has it been done before, but rather how well is it done? Jonathan Rosenbaum from Chicago Reader says, the moral divisions set up between characters are childishly overdrawn. And worst of all, the behavior shown by the boys and adults frequently reeks of falsity and contrivance. Though this review is ridiculous, I do think it's funny how Jonathan just looks like the kind of person that would naturally complain. In fact, when watching Dennis the Menace the movie, he spent the whole time rooting for Mr. Wilson to keep his precious lawn clear of any troublemaker child.
He's a menace.
To complain that the characters in Dead Poets Society are childishly overdrawn is a stupid thing to say, because otherwise, if they were just cardboard caricatures, then we wouldn't remember who was who. The cast doesn't even consist of the token black kid to help us remember who's who. And to claim that their behaviours reek of falsity makes absolutely no sense. Like if Jonathan here drives like an old person slowing down traffic, I then cannot come along and say that his driving reeks of falsity.
Senior citizens, although slow and dangerous behind the wheel, can still serve a purpose.
Bad driving, yes, but not false because it actually happened. Things that happen, good or bad, cease to be false as soon as they exist. Odie Henderson from House Next Door says, Dead Poets Society purports to be about the bravery of following one's own path. This is a bright, shining lie, one the film is ballsy enough to tell to your face. Actually, Odie, the film is about the dangers of following one's path, like in the case of Neil who took that road, and we all know what the end of that road looked like for him. Odie needs to actually watch the film in its entirety, because it's more about choices we make, and the consequences not aligning with our life decisions. Neil followed his heart and found a bullet in his head. Cameron, on the other hand, God, how I hate that little red-headed pillock, was studious and obedient to the end, yet he lost valuable friendships on that path which will never be mended. Sure, he might have been the one in the group voted most likely to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, but ultimately he'll still be an arse. So Odie, move along now with your pissy reviews and stop squatting down with your pants down to take a big carpe diem on all our fun. Kurt Jacobson from Chicago Reader says, we never are privy to Keating's personal life, nor do we quite grasp why such a talented individual is devoted to pedagogy. Do the letters TMI mean anything to this dimwit?
It's just easier to say TMI. I used to say don't go there, but that's lame.
Where is there time in the entire film to cram information in about Mr. Keating's backstory? Save that for the prequel. Or better yet, go see Good Will Hunting.
My wife used to fart when she was nervous.
Which might as well serve as a spiritual sequel to this film, especially since no school district would want to hire him. We don't need information on Mr. Keating. That's what makes him so mysterious. His purpose in the film and in these boys' lives is to be a fleeting presence there only to drop kernels of knowledge to free the boys' imprisoned minds. The aloofness of Mr. Keating is an integral part of the story, as it's best to leave the viewers to wonder who this man actually is and where he came from. I swear some critics just don't have the ability to draw their own conclusions anymore. I wonder, did Kurt stand up and cheer when we learned of the origin story of those damn dice in Star Wars? And now it's time for the most honest review given for Robin Williams' tentpole dramatic movie. This week's most honest review comes from Lyric Wywiri Smith. He wrote that Dead Poets Society is an achingly beautiful story of high school boys who give up the guards of their masculinity and family expectations to believe in something beautiful and real.
Tell us what your favorite classroom movie is down in the comments. Have a movie request for us? Consider becoming a patron and we'll accept your suggestion as a thank you. Find us on Instagram and look for the hidden tomato in our thumbnails.